Today is a really, really special day because we have one of the celebrities in disease reversal and lifestyle medicine who will be talking to us today, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. About Joel Fuhrman, I mean, I can go on and on to talk about Dr. Fuhrman, but I can summarize it in one line, which is that he is absolutely the one person that has influenced my thinking in disease reversal more than anybody else. And I consider him as a pioneer, as one of the fathers of lifestyle medicine. He's an American celebrity doctor who advocates what he calls a micronutrient-rich diet. He calls himself a nutritarian. That's a word that he coined. And he's coined very, very interesting and catchy words that have caught on in his many TV shows, his several best-selling books, such as Eat to Live, The End of Diabetes, The End of Heart Disease, Eat for Life, Super Immunity, and his most recent one, Fast Food Genocide. He's a former competitive figure skater who suffered a major injury and was removed from competition. And he will tell us his story about he restored his own health by following this nutritarian program. We're delighted that he recently moved to California. So I'm hoping that Joel will have a lot more access to you. And I know that this isn't the last time we're going to be having you as a guest on our program. You can read all about his bio, where he went to medical school, and so on. But absolutely, in a nutshell, you're going to be delighted by this presentation, which I can guarantee is the best presentation, the best presenter that we have brought to you this far. And like I said, I have a personal connection with him because when I wrote my book, Turbo Metabolism, 2 years ago, my publisher said I need to find somebody famous to write a blurb so that they can put their name on the front cover. And I didn't know any celebrities, but I had heard of Joel Fuhrman, so I thought I'm gonna start from the top and work my way down. So I just sent him a cold call email. Didn't know him from anybody. And within minutes, I get a response. And within hours, we're on the phone. Such a delightful, honest, generous person that he agreed to read my manuscript and actually made some really interesting changes in it, some suggestions for changes, and ended up writing the foreword to my book and got his name on the front cover. Thank you so much for that, Joel. Pleasure. So without further ado, let's bring on American doctor, celebrity, over 30 years of disease reversal, Dr. Joel Fuhrman.
Thank you so much. Such a warm introduction. Certainly, it was an exciting night to be talking to this group and to people interested in health and nutrition, and very excited about being here today.
Wonderful. So please tell us your story. How did we get here?
Well, you know, as you said, I was a competitive figure skater and trying to eat healthy for my skating career. But when I started reading health and nutrition books, I was a teenager because my father was overweight and sickly. And I incorporated that into my life and was incorporated into my family's life. And when I got to a certain age, I just recognized and was influenced, of course, that my passion really was nutrition, and going to medical school would be the best avenue to be able to exercise that passion and have the most rewarding career, since I was so passionate and interested in nutritional excellence. And I knew back then, 40 years ago or more, that people were digging their graves with their knives and forks, and people were going to doctors and getting poisonous drugs, for things that they were creating with their own bad health habits. So as you said, lifestyle medicine is 1,000 times more effective than taking medications and conventional medicine, which just give people poisons on top of their already toxic and dangerous diet. Removal of cause is what always made sense to me. And that is when you hit yourself with a hammer and smash up your hand, you don't want to just take a pain medication for it where you give yourself another smash the next day. You want to stop hitting yourself so your body can heal. And we've been socialized to believe in other words, to ignore the miraculous self-healing powers of the human body. And my whole career has been based on when you establish this optimal environment for healing, we can let the body heal itself. And autoimmune conditions like asthma and rheumatoid arthritis and psoriasis and lupus can go away. And people can get rid of their type 2 diabetes and become non-diabetic. And your blood pressure can go back to normal again. And your cholesterol could lower, and your heart disease, the obstructions and blockages in your blood vessels can melt away, and you could get back to good health again. And we have an unprecedented opportunity in human history to live, to age slower and to live longer than ever before with all we've learned about nutritional science. So my message is it should be reading, writing, arithmetic, and nutritional science taught in elementary schools and in school and to young people. We should be learning it as the basis of our educational process because nutrition is the most critical information that controls our intelligence, our creativity, our emotional state, our health, our longevity, and whether we get cancer, heart disease, strokes, or dementia. We have the ability to win the war on cancer right now. We know how to do it. People don't like the answer, but we know the answer. And if people would eat the right type of diet, we could wipe out more than 90% of cancers and probably more than 99% of heart disease. So we really have the answer for what ails the modern world, and people now have to learn it and embrace it.
Wonderful, thank you. So you're saying that these chronic diseases are really reversible, and this is really astonishing. And when I tell any of my patients that, they're absolutely shocked. So please tell us more.
That's right. I mean, can you imagine that if you go to a doctor and you're overweight with high blood pressure and diabetes, they tell you you have to be on drugs the rest of your life. And we know that these medications increase risk of cancer. And in many cases, they make the diabetes worse and accelerate a person's death because they make a person gain weight. Statin drugs make you gain weight. You know, diabetic, the sulfonylureas make you gain weight. You know, a lot of the medications, doctor, even beta blockers can worsen diabetes control and make you gain weight. The point I'm making is these medications accelerate the disease process, and they give people psychologically the impression that their numbers look better on a blood test or with a blood pressure cuff, so they're okay because their numbers look better, and they keep getting sicker and sicker. And of course, they don't change the way they eat. And it gives them the intellectual and emotional support that they're being adequately treated with drugs. If we never had medications, doctors would be forced to tell people, you have to drop 20 pounds, you've got to start eating more vegetables, you've got to stop eating sweets and honey and maple syrup and fried foods. I want to see what you eat. I want there's no salt in your diet. I want to see you back in 2 weeks. Make sure your blood pressure's down. If we didn't have medications, people would be forced to change their lifestyle to get well. And then we wouldn't have had this crisis in healthcare, where healthcare has exploded with expenses beyond belief, and a population where we have a growing waistlines and growing number of people having autoimmune disease and cancer. And I'm saying this growing problems are directly the result of the pharmacology, the medical pharmacology complex, and of course, mixed in with the fast food revolution in there too. And that people think they can go to doctors and make themselves look better with drugs. They don't have to have any personal responsibility, and they can keep eating the wrong diets. So in any case, what I'm saying right now is the most rewarding part of my career is telling people they absolutely can get off their diabetic medications. And just as they can lose weight, they get off, if they eat right, they can lower their blood pressure back to normal, and they can melt away their heart disease. But besides that, why have to have fear of cancer and dementia as you age? Because if you eat the standard diet, those are things that are going to develop. Your risk of getting cancer is higher as you get older, and your risk of getting dementia and memory loss is, almost inevitable. And then, of course, we have this COVID thing. Well, of course, I'm mentioning autoimmune conditions, and one of the biggest reward is getting people with lupus that can kill a person, or psoriasis, or psoriatic arthritis, or rheumatoid arthritis, or Sjogren's syndromes, or all types of mixed connective tissue diseases and pain syndromes like fibromyalgia, where people can absolutely get completely better and not need medications at all for the rest of their life. And that's so critical because the medications prescribed by rheumatologists are chemotherapeutic agents that are cancer-causing drugs. So they're the drugs that are most toxic and most linked to cancer, even more than blood pressure medications and diabetic medications are. And of course, and with all these sick people who are eating improperly, and we have our whole population is overweight and malnourished, and then a simple virus like COVID-19 can come around and start killing people and putting people in ICUs on ventilators because because their nutrition is poor and they're not taking good care of their health.
Wonderful. That's really interesting to hear. How long does it take to reverse disease in your experience when you have someone who's had diabetes for 10, 15, 20 years? What do you see in your experience as far as the actual reversal?
It varies, but I have a man here right now who was on medications for diabetes with his sugars uncontrolled, over 300 when he came in, and his sugars were totally normal now after 2 weeks. Taking him off all medications, his blood pressure was like 200 over 110 when he came in, and he came straight from the hospital here on 3 medications to control his blood pressure. And then when he was here a week, his blood pressure was normal. I could take him off the medications, but usually people get rid of their diabetes in the first month, but then by 3 to 6 months, 90% of my type 2 diabetics are diabetic free, meaning they don't require medication. They're fasting, morning sugars stay below 100, and they've lost enough weight and eaten healthfully enough for the beta cells to start functioning better, and they get more natural insulin production and they reduce their insulin resistance. So usually their blood pressure and diabetes come back to normal within the first months, but sometimes it could take 3 to 6 months. There's also, of course, some people with type 1.5 diabetes that have burned out their beta cells for so many years of using drugs and eating poorly that there's a small percent, but that can't reverse it totally, but that percent is under 10%.
And does it make a difference how long they've had it, or do certain people do better than others?
It doesn't really matter how long they've had it. Usually the person who has been many years taking the oral medications like glipizide and gliburide and the sulfonylureas, many years of taking those could burn out your beta cells in the pancreas, and then they had to move on to insulin after all those years of taking it. And so some of those people don't have full beta cell function. But we always have them take less medication. But sometimes, there are some type 2 diabetics that are no longer real type 2s anymore. Their insulin production by the beta cells are almost non-existent, and they require a little bit of insulin. Nevertheless, even a type 1 diabetic, or if you're a type 2 that burned out your beta cells and you're a type 1.5, eating this way still prevents the morbidity and mortality that befalls a type 1 diabetic or a person who needs insulin. What I'm saying right now, the way we treat our type 1 diabetics is barbaric, because we let them take more insulin to cover whatever they want to eat. And excess insulin drives cancer, causes weight gain, and accelerates the morbidity and mortality of type 1 diabetes and type 2. So when we have a type 1 diabetic, we're usually reducing their insulin by about a half. And with time, we can reduce it by about 60%. So they're only taking 40% of what they originally were taking before. And they're eating the diet to require excessive amounts of insulin. They may be taking 3 to 4 units with it before each meal, and maybe 10 to 15 at night. So they're taking somewhere between, between 15 and 25 units of insulin a day. They're not taking 40, 50, 60, 80 units of insulin a day. It's the excess insulin that type 1 diabetics are taking. That's because they become insulin resistant and eat a diet that's not healthy. And it's the diet and the excess insulin that's killing off these type 1s early. And the fact that doctors allow that or advise that, they advise just eat, cover your carbohydrate with more insulin, not restricting their diet to a lower glycemic, more favorable diet, so you don't require all that insulin.
So you're saying, Dr. Fuhrman, that you have a solution. You're doing something magical here, which it seems like mainstream medicine doesn't know about or doesn't talk about. You're saying that type 2 diabetes can be reversed in the sense that you can reduce medications for almost everyone, in some cases eliminate medications. You're saying heart disease can be reversed, symptoms can be improved, medication can be reduced. You talked about autoimmune conditions, which is a big deal. You talked about lupus. There's other ones like thyroid conditions or rheumatoid arthritis. It seems like we have an epidemic of autoimmune conditions. And you're saying that you have a solution for all this? What is it that you do? What happens when someone comes to see you and gets on your plan?
It's funny because when they come to see me, I say, do you want to improve your health somewhat, or do you really want to go all out with 100% nutritional excellence and lose 20 pounds the first month and 10 pounds the second month and get totally well from your psoriasis, your diabetes, or your asthma? Or do you want to just do this? And they say, no, I want to do everything. I want to do exactly, I want to get totally well. And then I say to them, well, then don't decide, then you can't make any choices about what to eat. It's not about what you like to eat, what you feel like eating, what you think you should eat, what you learned you should eat, it's, I want to control what you eat. I'm going to decide what goes into your mouth, and then we can give you the absolute perfection of human nutrition with enough green vegetables and enough raw and enough cooked with mushrooms and onions and scallions and all these healing foods and berries and flax seeds. And then I promise you, I will teach you the recipes and your taste buds will improve and change. And I guarantee you will love eating this way and love the flavor and the taste and the enjoyment of it. But at the beginning, don't go for that. At the beginning, just do exactly what I say, because it takes time for your taste preferences to change, and it takes time for you to learn the recipes, and it takes time for you to, so while you're learning about this, just do exactly what I say, and then you'll at least be testing my protocols that I've developed over the last 30 years for diabetes or for lupus. You'll be testing it and see, is this really as efficacious as Dr. Fuhrman says? Will it really get rid of my psoriasis? Will it really get rid of my lupus? Will I really lose 15 to 20 pounds the first month? Will I really and continue to lose 8 to 10 pounds every single month till I get to my ideal weight? So in other words, when you do it, it works, but people really have to do it. And if they're sick, they can't do an 80% version. If they're sickly, they have to do it 100%, because that's when the miracles happen. When you take away all the nutritional stresses, you remove all the extra salt, the fried foods, the meats and the fats, and you really get them on an excellent diet, and the body starts to get flooded with phytochemicals and micronutrients, and the body's own miraculous self-healing powers are able to flourish.
Wonderful. So you just said something about eliminating meat and oil. So am I hearing that what you're promoting is a vegan or a veganish diet? Because we've heard things about Mediterranean diets that have things like olive oil and salmon, and we hear that omega-3 oils are really important for the diet. And now we're talking about a vegan diet, which is very low in fat.
That's right. Well, one thing we know from the large-scale epidemiologic studies, and we give more credence to studies that go on for decades with many thousands and thousands of people, and that look at hard endpoints like death. And what we find in those studies is that the exclusion of all fat from the diet or the use of oil does not allow for lifespan enhancement compared to using some nuts and seeds in the diet. That the utilization of nuts and seeds as your main source of fat, and we're talking about flax seeds and sesame seeds and walnuts and pecans as your main source of fat in your diet. And so nuts and seeds are definitively, in the meta-analysis in almost every study tested, show dramatic enhancements in cardiovascular mortality and all-cause mortality and cancer rates for some using some whole plant food fats in their diet. And as you mentioned earlier, the omega-3 index is also critically important. Now, even though I advocate a vegan diet or a near vegan diet for my patients with disease, and with serious illnesses here at my retreat, we don't play around with small amounts of animal products, because when people are overweight and food addicted, a little bit of animal products makes them want to eat more of it, and they don't have a cutoff switch, and they don't really know how much is okay. It's better to just take it out completely and just put them on a vegetable-based diet. It assures them the most, the most boundary lines of how far they should go. I have no strong objection for a healthy person wanting to eat a few ounces a week, 2 to 6 ounces a week of animal products. So most Americans are eating, 10 to 15 ounces a day. I don't mind a few ounces a week, but the point is that it's just simpler to give people a vegan diet, especially when they're sick. But then my 3 decades of experience of treating the vegan community, and many of which were elderly people who were my mentors even, who were eating super healthy vegan diets, and watch them become demented in their later years or develop Parkinson's made me very cautious about the lack of omega-3 fatty acids, preformed omega-3 fatty acids. So there is a benefit to taking fish oil or eating some fish if you are omega-3 deficient. But nowadays, we have available vegan omega-3. So you don't have, that's EPA and DHA. What I'm saying right now, there's something in the blood called an omega-3 index, where you can do a blood test to discern whether the level of omega-3 of DHA and EPA compared to omega-6 fatty acids on the blood cell membranes have at least 5%, let's say, of omega-3 compared to omega-6 on the membranes of your cells. And we see that levels below 5% start to develop higher risk of cognitive impairment and dementia and even brain shrinkage with aging for people who have 4%, 3%, 2%. And the amount of your ability to convert short chain ALA into EPA and then DHA is very genetically determined based on your conversion enzymes. So some people convert it more regularly and more easily. They don't really have to eat those fats, and other people are more dependent on them. But I'm cautious to make sure none of my patients or my people who follow my work don't get into trouble with developing later life. Because if they live to be, 95 or 100 years old, we don't want them having to suffer with dementia or the last 10 years of their life, like so many have. We want them living longer and keeping their full mental faculties intact. And the way we achieve that is keeping an eye on their omega-3 index as they're getting older, before they get to the old age, and make sure they supplement accordingly to make sure they keep that omega-3 index above 5.
Beautiful. Dr. Fuhrman, we have over 20 questions already, so folks, keep the questions coming. You guys are coming in from all over the world, and again, we're delighted and privileged to have Dr. Fuhrman with us today. And we'll start taking those questions in just a few minutes. I have a couple more questions for him, and I know he has more of a message to share with us too. But a lot of the questions are along the lines of, what is a sample day or what is a sample diet? And Dr. Fuhrman, one of your messages that stuck with me from very early on was, you coined words and you have all these acronyms, and I love G-bombs. And then I've seen a version of that, F and G-bombs. Can you tell us more about that?
G-bombs was originally designed to represent those foods with the most scientific support and documentation in the scientific literature to show protection against developing cancer in later life. And it stands for the GBOMBS, stands for greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. I want people to eat these foods every single day, because I do. I eat greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds every single day. And now more than ever before, this message has to get out, because the same, you could say, phytonutrients, like the ergothioneine in mushrooms, or the lignans in flax seeds, or the isothiocyanates in green cruciferous vegetables, these same compounds that protect us against cancer, normalize your immune function, prevent cytokine storm, keep our defenses high against viral invasion, and make us so exposure to COVID-19 becomes a meaningless exposure. The same foods and the same substances that protect us against cancer support the immune system, so our immune system doesn't allow viruses to take a more pathogenic form, to replicate uncontrolled, to invade body tissues, and to cause excess inflammation. I'm saying something that's people are not talking about sufficiently in the media, that we can reduce this fear and stop these deaths if people ate healthfully and ate their G-bombs and stopped eating sweets and high glycemic carbohydrates like white rice and white bread and white flour products and fried foods and oils and high sugary things like honey and maple syrup and sweets. If people started eating really healthy and took in their big salads and vegetable bean stews and soups and chilies, and they started eating properly, COVID-19 wouldn't stand a chance. It would be long gone by now. But we have a weakened population of all ages, and the more overweight you become, the more pro-inflammatory your tissues are. Fat cells spew out cytokines and lipokines and reactive oxygen species and make you more prone to inflammation when you get a viral replication in the body, and an immune system response to the viruses just make you get a tremendous amount of inflammation in the body. Even when we see a relatively younger person who gets seriously ill or even killed from COVID-19. It's they're eating all kinds of junk food and fast foods, and their immune systems are not functioning well. So, what I'm saying right now, it's not just age, it's because the years of that you go on and gain weight and eat unhealthily, people get older and their immune systems are really in bad shape. And those with chronic disease, of course, have poorly functioning immune systems. They wouldn't have developed chronic disease. And I'm saying here that there's no such thing as a healthy overweight person, because fat cells is dangerous tissue that spews out reactive oxygen species and pro-inflammatory substances that make you insulin resistant, that promote excessive activity of aromatase, which makes you produce too much estrogen. And there's a lot of factors, there's a lot of dangers that fat on the body create to shorten your lifespan. And now in the COVID-19 era, being overweight and eating poorly is like committing suicide, because if you get sick, you could be dead, you could be killed. So if you weren't going to take this seriously before of eating right and getting your weight down, now's the time to do it. By the way, the basic principle of a nutritarian diet is this: the most foundational principle, the only proven methodology to slow aging and to extend human lifespan, is moderate caloric restriction in the context of micronutrient excellence. Trying to get as much nutritional bang per caloric buck as you can. Pick foods that have a full rainbow of important nutrients per calorie. And when you do that, the more you supply your body with its needed micronutrients, and the higher the micronutrient density of foods you absorb, of you can consume, the less your appetite becomes. You're satisfied with less food, and you don't need to overeat anymore. And when you don't meet your micronutrient needs, and when you eat processed foods and fried foods and sweets and bagels and pizza and French fries and burgers, and when you eat unhealthy foods, you become a calorie-consuming monster, and you can't stop putting food in your mouth. And if you don't overeat constantly, you feel too fatigued and weak because you need to overstimulate yourself with extra calories. So you comfortably eat the right amount of calories only when you eat the right foods. So this enables people to control their ravenous appetites and their addictive eating behaviors.
And I know you've created indices of superfoods, and you even have a superfood index, which is very popular. And would you say that the G-BOMBs would be sort of a broad group of what you would consider as nutrient-dense foods that would give us the nutrients that we need without excess calories?
Yes, definitely. But I put vegetables are the key to a healthy diet. People don't like that term vegetables. They'd rather have a magic pill so they can still smoke and not get lung cancer. But if they don't eat the vegetables, they're at risk of breast cancer, prostate cancer. And we want people to eat a lot of green vegetables too. So when you asked me earlier, what does a nutritarian diet look like? The lunches I serve people here at our retreat, and I want people to eat, I want them to have a big salad of raw vegetables with some cruciferous on it, like cabbage or bok choy or arugula or cabbages. And I want them to have a dressing that instead of using an oil-based dressing, I want it to be made from nuts and seeds. That might be blending, cashews and sesame seeds mixed with a navel orange with some blood orange vinegar and lemon. Or it might be a tomato sauce with sun-dried tomatoes and roasted garlic and a little bit of balsamic and some almond butter in there. Or maybe, in other words, a big salad with maybe beans and scallions and red onion and then a bowl of vegetable bean soup or a stew or a chili or some bean dish. So they have vegetable bean soup and a big salad and a piece of fruit for dessert. If the whole world just did that lunch, we'd stop seeing all these deaths. And lunch is the most important meal of the day, by the way. That should be your main meal is lunch. We shouldn't be eating a lot at dinner. Dinner could be like a mixed vegetable wok, a water wok vegetable with a Thai curry sauce, or it could be, a lot of different. Today we had a bean wrap and some chopped salad with a guacamole dip, whatever you're eating. But I'm just saying you want to eat at a lighter dinner and an earlier dinner. The trick to a long life is not going to bed on a full stomach after a heavy meal. Eating this big heavy meal late at night of meat and cheese and fried foods where you have this big, heavy digesting meal in your stomach all night long, that really tremendously shortens lifespan. The trick is to eat a light, earlier dinner, finish eating by 5 or 6 o'clock, and try not to eat the rest of the night. Clean your teeth, clean the kitchen, shut the door of the restaurant, meaning your kitchen down, and do other things to occupy your interest late at night, and don't keep eating food all night long.
Beautiful. That's very much in line with what we've learned in Ayurveda, where they talk about the digestive fire being the strongest in the daytime, and for lunch to be the main meal, and to eat a very light dinner, and not to go to bed on a full stomach. That's really wonderful. And we were talking the other day, and you had said something about preventing COVID. It's good to not touch your face, but you said something else about not touching, which I think was a very catchy phrase as well.
Yes, I said, more important than keeping your hands away from your face is keeping the junk food and fried foods and sweets away from your hands. So an ancient wise man once said that about COVID-19.
Thank you. We have over 25 questions here. They're just pouring in, Dr. Fuhrman, but we'd love for you to go on. So please tell us more of your message.
Well, I would just like to make something clear, that we're trying to have people eat more high protein plant foods and not high protein animal foods. Because a lot of questions about protein, and the large studies, and even the study, Seventh-day Adventist Health Study 2, show that more animal proteins raise IGF-1, which speed aging and more chronic disease. And plant proteins prevent IGF-1 from going too low, but also prevent it from going too high. You want your IGF-1 to be moderately low, but not too low. And a vegan diet that's too low in protein can cause the IGF-1 to drop too low in the elderly. And a diet that has too much animal protein can cause the IGF-1 to get too high. And we can dial the IGF-1 right to the perfect level and keep it there. And that's why eating foods like green vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds in the same diet, even using soybeans, both edamame and dried soybeans, and red beans and lentils, and in conjunction with green vegetables. We're talking about using green vegetables both raw and cooked, which complements the beans, and also, of course, utilizing some nuts and seeds, which also give you a protein richness. And whole grains that are intact, like quinoa, are a favored grain because they're protein adequate and not high in arsenic. And we're taking people off their rice-based diets, off the white rice because of the high glycemic effect, and off the brown rice because brown rice in this country has been contaminated with arsenic. Most of the rice paddies have been converted for the soils are not good, and they've been fertilizing them with chicken manure that's arsenic contaminated. And the brown rice in particular takes up arsenic into the hull. And when we're doing tests on people, we're seeing a lot of people on high brown rice diets having very high levels of arsenic in their tissues and in their blood. And arsenic is a carcinogen. So we're trying to switch people to whole grains that do not contain high levels of arsenic as well. So yes, we're trying to get the plant protein down and increase the animal protein down and increase the high protein plant foods like green vegetables, like beans, like soy, and soybeans, like quinoa, and of course, lentils and mushrooms and things like that. So breakfast might be a time when you eat seeds. You use a whole grain, like steel-cut oats or quinoa, a little bit, but you put your flax seeds and your hemp seeds or your chia seeds in there, because you want those omega-3, and you want the lignans from those seeds with berries. It could be other fruit, but with some berries or low-sugar fruits that are rich in flavonoids. You might make a delicious breakfast, something like that, whereas lunch is the salad and the soup. And the piece of fruit for dessert, and dinner, of course, usually is some type of prepared green vegetables where you're using woked or cooked or steamed or blanched or frozen greens like artichokes and asparagus and cabbages and bok choy and mushrooms and onions. And so that's the style of eating, And if a person doesn't want to be a vegan and wants to include animal products, they can put a small amount of flavor a dish, like maybe an ounce per person, just to give a little flavor to something a few times a week, and not use animal product like a whole giant big piece on the plate. So they're still eating a high vegetable diet with the G-bombs in it, even if they do choose to use a small amount of animal product.
Wonderful. So we're hearing G-bombs with every meal, lots of vegetables, eat lots of plants. Beans are superfoods. They're loaded with nutrients without a lot of calories. This is great, Dr. Fuhrman, but sometimes when I go to CNN to check up on the news, I see this sponsored content, and I keep hearing from some guy who talks about the plant paradox and how you can die from eating beans and they have lectins and certain plants can be poisonous and things like that. Have you heard anything about that?
Yes, I actually been on his show, been interviewed on his show, on his radio show. Anyway, yes, I know who that is, and he's distorted the science. It's not really the way that is. I mean, we know that all long-lived populations eat beans, and the more beans they eat, the longer they live. So number one, bean consumption and bean eating is linked to longer life. But it is true that when you don't cook beans sufficiently, especially red beans like azuki beans and kidney beans, they have agglutinins that if you don't cook them thoroughly, they could cause a problem in some people. And they're not, in other words, they're not healthy to eat beans if they're not thoroughly cooked. We do recommend that when people eat beans, they soak them overnight and then they move the dirt, mix it around to take the dirt or the stones out of them, throw the cleaning water away that they soaked overnight in, and then cook them well in a pot, in a soup, in a pressure cooker, in a fast, slow cooker, whatever it is. Keep them on the flame if it's a long time to make sure they're soft. Then the glutenins are deactivated. Those parts of the beans are not harmful when you let them cook long enough. And so that's one answer. But the other answer is, it is true that a small percent of rheumatoid arthritis patients are sensitive to beans, and it's better when you're trying to get them off drugs and reverse the rheumatoid arthritis to take away the beans first. Some people are sensitive to nightshades. Some people, as you know, are sensitive to gluten in wheat, and some people are sensitive to these lectins in beans. And I have a person here now at my retreat who came in on 150 milligrams a day. I'm sorry, 150 milligrams of the narcotics, plus 20 milligrams of steroid, plus her autoimmune drugs, plus, 6 Tylenol a day and 10 Motrins a day. She went on so many drugs when she got here. And so what I'm saying right now is she's doing wonderfully. She's almost off all medications without pain right now. And I slowly but we had to take the beans out of her diet because we moved the beans in and out, and we figured out that the beans were bothering her. So we slowly advanced her diet and customized the program for her. So there are some people who have damage to their lining of the digestive tract that can be sensitive to beans, and we may eventually be able to reproduce them, a year from now when she's really healed all the way.
Wonderful. So my mother-in-law has osteoarthritis. She's had a knee replacement. She's had neck surgery, back surgery. She's in a lot of pain all the time. Now, granted, it's not autoimmune, but do you see people like that, elderly people with chronic pain from arthritis that gets better with eating a nutritarian diet?
Yes, I do. I mean, obviously, we can't reverse everything when there's calcified, when the cartilage is gone, and when the joints are destroyed, and when you're bone to bone and there's no cartilage there, and you have calcium spicules. Some things are too far advanced, but general inflammation is reduced or eliminated, especially if we catch things early. So inevitably, people feel better, but of course, joint damage could occur that becomes irreversible at some point if you don't start doing this soon enough in life with that kind of an illness. You know what I mean? But so sometimes it's like the same things with with stem cell treatments of cartilage degeneration. Once the cartilage is gone, there's nothing for the architecture for the stem cells to adhere to. So we have to try to get people eating healthfully earlier in life and doing the right things. And of course, sometimes foot pronation can increase the risk of knee and hip osteoarthritis. We look at their stance and whether they need to put a wedge in their shoe to make sure their feet are held in the right direction. A lot of things we do biomechanically, including allowing muscles that have become spasmed and hard to get soft and get nutrients in them, because they can be constricting, causing inflammation, restricting blood flow and nutrients from getting to the joint capsule or getting to so some people are in pain because the muscles are in spasm, and feeding them healthfully is not going to get them cured because the nutrients can't get into the muscles because they're full of lactic acid and they've spasmed down. So we have to combine the diet with body work to soften the tissue and structural normalization to make sure their feet and their hips are in good alignment, and then we see people make progress.
Wonderful. So let's take a few questions. We have a ton of questions that are popping up in the chat box as well as the Q&A. Please keep them coming. We'll try to get to as many of them, if not all of them. We have Dr. Fuhrman with us, and we want to take advantage of this fantastic opportunity. So thank you again, Dr. Fuhrman. Are you ready for some questions?
All set.
All right. So the first one is about vitamin D deficiency, and I'm going to expand that into other nutrients as well. because we talked a little bit about omega-3 already. So what are sort of the top 4 or 5 nutrients that you do recommend taking as a supplement, even for people that are eating your way, the nutritarian diet?
Right. Definitely the top four are B12, iodine, because we're not recommending people use iodinated salt anymore. We're trying to have them just use the sodium that's a natural food and not salt their foods. So we're definitely concerned about iodine too. So it's iodine, B12, zinc, because we get poor bioavailability of zinc as we age, and it can support, and the deficient the zinc absorption goes down as you get older, could be why your immune system is not fully protecting against COVID. So we want to make sure we give people about 10 milligrams of zinc too. So it's vitamin D, wanting to people to keep in that normal range. The normal range is between 30 and 50. Then, we're talking to people all over the world. There's different systems of monitoring vitamin D. But in the United States, the normal range is between 30 and 50. And I think you can take too much vitamin D and it's going to be harmful, and too little vitamin D. And the point I'm making right now is that too much of certain nutrients in supplemental form can be harmful too. And people who are advocating not using any supplements at all can pull out a study that shows that this maybe supplement showed it wasn't favorable when you supplemented it because they're supplementing too high. And I'm saying deficiencies are bad and excess is bad too. We want to be in that sweet spot. You don't just want to take 10,000 of vitamin D because more is better, that some people are advocating. I'm advocating, 1,000 to 2,000 to be in that level of 30 to 40, 30 to 50. And then so vitamin D, is important to be in that normal range. And the other important nutrients are B12, zinc, iodine, and then DHA and EPA. The ones that are more marginal are things like K2 is not present in plants, which may be a benefit, but that's not one of the top 5. So I think it's mostly zinc, DHA, B12, iodine, and vitamin D is definitely the most important ones. And don't forget my message that it's important not to take a supplement that contains folic acid, because folic acid, we suspect, drives cellular replication and increases risk of cancer. So we want to get our folate from green vegetables and beans and not take a multivitamin or a pill that has folic acid in it. I mean, I don't use nutritional yeast that's fortified with folic acid because too much folic acid might be driving increased risk of breast and prostate cancer. And we see a lot of studies now showing that folic acid has negative effects in promoting cancer when people are supplementing with that. And you don't need to supplement with folic acid. Natural foods give all the folate we need. What I'm saying right now is folate is not the same thing as folic acid. Folic acid is petroleum derived. It's a synthetic ingredient. It's not the same thing as the real folate, the real thing we get when we eat green vegetables.
Excellent. What about, in my practice, I see iron deficiency too in people that get on this kind of eating pattern of a whole food, plant-based, or a vegan diet. You recommend iron supplements?
Only when the ferritin is below 50. In other words, some people's iron may become iron deficient. There's a big range of ability to absorb iron. And some people need iron and other people don't. I don't use a cookbook approach with iron. Even with pregnancy, even with women who are pregnant, the medical profession gives iron to all pregnant women, but the best outcome occurs when you measure their ferritin levels and you check their iron stores and you give them either nothing if they don't need it, a small amount if they need a little, or a higher amount if they need more. It's better if you adjust it to the blood test than just willy-nilly do the same with everybody. So there are some people that need iron, but certainly not everybody.
Wonderful, thank you. And as I mentioned, we have a huge Indian community listening because this program is using the India Community Center platform, which is the largest India community center in North America. And we have a lot of members that are joining us from the United States who are of Indian descent, as well as from India as well. And that's why we chose this time, because it's morning time there. And so the question is about Indian flatbread, which is called roti. And the question is, do you have any thoughts about that? And along the same lines, a follow-up about that was salt or minimal oil that is used to cook Indian food, as long as we're not really deep frying it. Is a little bit of salt and a little bit of oil permissible? And what do you think about roti?
No, I don't think a little bit of those foods are acceptable in my patients who are overweight. Oil is an appetite stimulant. It stops fat loss on the body. And salt is also an appetite stimulant. And we're taking people who've irritated their endothelium, the lining of the blood vessels. Salt causes microvascular hemorrhaging, chronic inflammation on the interior lining of the blood vessels. It doesn't just raise blood pressure. It shortens life by many different synergistic mechanisms, increasing the risk of not just heart attack, but also hemorrhagic stroke, where you bleed into your brain and can devastate or kill people. So when people are coming to me for advice to reverse disease, we're not giving them any salt or any oil. That's not saying that a person can't live a long life with a little bit of salt and oil, but that's not because they ate the salt and oil. It's because they didn't eat too much salt and oil, and because maybe they're just naturally, their genetics allow them to live longer or be healthier. What I'm saying right now is that most people who are not getting good results, who are still overweight and are still having high blood pressure or some problems, are much better taking the salt and oil out of their diet completely. We want any bread or any carbohydrate to be from intact whole grains, not from finely ground pastry flours. So when you're grinding the wheat berries to make the flatbread, they should be coarsely ground, so they're not as highly glycemic, and the bread should be a thick, whole grain bread. And you can put some chickpea flour in there or lentil flour. We can make the bread in these type of bread-like materials lower glycemic by using chickpeas or lentils and using steel-cut oats or whole wheat berries that are not finely ground to like talcum powder type of substance. So we make a little thicker, more type of substance like that. So yes, unfortunately, I want people to remove the rice, remove the salt, remove the oil, and you shouldn't be cooking with oil, because when oil is heated, it becomes rancid. What I'm saying right now is, it's up to you whether you want to do this 100% or not. But if you want to give me the advice, my advice to maximally reverse disease and maximally extend human lifespan, you're better off without the salt and oil in the diet.
Excellent, excellent. So you're saying no salt and oil. If you're eating roti, it should be, the flour should not be finely ground. It should be coarsely ground and have a lot of fiber in it, so it has a lower glycemic load. Excellent, thank you.
Right.
Move on to the next one, and it relates to immune potentiation or immune system regulation. And there's a couple of questions about that. We'll take the first one as it relates to COVID, because a lot of people are purporting superfoods that are immune stimulants that will protect you against COVID. Are there any diet therapies for COVID-19 other than keeping the junk food away from your face?
Absolutely. And that's why I'm out here screaming from the rooftops about people eating their mushrooms and onions and scallions and green vegetables. And make a smoothie, put the greens in there with a little bit of berries, and put some flaxseed or chia seeds in. Get these healthy, drink a glass of vegetable juice if you have to. But what we're saying to people is that any nutritional deficiency could increase risk of COVID. We want to have, that's one of the principles here. You want to have a wide variety of nutrients, and you don't want to be missing any particular nutrient that the immune system needs. Because the mistake people don't understand is that they think that if we have a powerful immune system with all these healthy superfoods, that our immune system will overreact and cause cytokine storm and cause more inflammation. But that's not what happened. The foods that we were eating, we're talking about G-bombs here, greens and onions and mushrooms and berries and seeds. It gives you a stronger immune system on both ends, which means it gives you more power to react, to stop viral replication and viral to escape immune system capture. And it inhibits the inflammation and the cytokine storm, the inflammatory response, from going too much to cause tissue destruction. It does both. It stops it at both ends. It creates instant reaction, a quick reaction, defeats the virus and prevents too much inflammation. When you have a weakened immunity, you react slowly to the virus, it replicates in your system, it evades immune system capture, and then it causes cytokines to be released too heavily, and you have chronic inflammation and damage that can increase the cause of death. Now, it might be additionally helpful, like we're saying, to take the zinc and to take a mixed mushroom extract. If you're not eating mushrooms or can't get variety of mushrooms, to use a mixed dehydrated mushroom powders, or to take some other things we can take, like turmeric, and green tea extract and mixed mushroom extracts and berry, but if it's also good just to eat the berries and eat the different mushrooms. But if you can't, but there's some supplements that could help that for immune protection. But the whole key here is if you eat healthy now, you're going to get thousands of different nutrients that are going to give you great immune function. And losing weight is important too. You have to get the fat off your body, getting the nutrients into your body and get the fat off your body. So when you eat these foods, they're satisfying, and you may not at the very beginning feel better the first week or so because your body's detoxing and losing weight. So you may not feel better the first week, but after that, you're going to feel much better, and your immune system is going to be, it's going to be day and night. You're going to be tremendously protected. Now's the time to do this. Now not to do this is irresponsible at this point in human history. Not to take good care of your health now is just utterly crazy.
Beautiful. Thank you for that. We have a question from Dr. Regor. Thank you, Dr. Regor, for this question. He says, I'm a lacto-vegetarian and I'm pre-diabetic. I get hungry often. How do I reduce hunger, and how do I satisfy hunger and not gain weight? Do you have any ideas for snacks that I can eat?
No, I don't want him to snack. The word snacking means overeating. The word snacking means recreational eating. It's very rare that a person needs more than 3 meals a day unless they're a professional athlete or a physical laborer working with a shovel and a pick or behind an ox in the field every day. It's very unusual. People would, in this day and age when we're sitting most of the day and we're doing mostly paperwork and on the phone, where you're going to need more than 3 meals a day. So feels he needs more food because the micronutrient and fiber density of his diet is too low. When he starts eating more, and of course we're talking here about having a meal with the raw vegetables, enough fiber from raw vegetables, raw carrot, raw tomatoes, scallions, lettuces, snow pea pods, jicama, eat raw vegetables. Then have cooked vegetables with that meal. Raw vegetables and cooked vegetables and beans and nuts and seeds. Have all those categories in the meal because the beans and the nuts and the fibers will make you feel very satiated and last and keep you satiated for 3 to 5 hours. You're not going to need to want to feel like snacking in the afternoon. And then have a piece of fruit for dessert or some defrosted frozen fruit like frozen cherries or frozen jackfruit or frozen mango or something. And that is very, very satisfying. And then close down the kitchen and don't eat till the next meal. So you really shouldn't be eating between meals. We're talking about getting in touch with your instinctual desire to eat calories. And hunger is the best sauce. It makes food taste better. We know that you're overeating when you're eating dinner before you got hungry for dinner. Then you overate at lunch or you had something in between dinner and lunch. You want to not eat if you're not hungry. And then when you get hungry, eat a meal, and then wait till you get hungry again. Don't eat the next meal. And what I'm saying, if you're eating right, you will not get hungry more than 3 times a day.
Thank you. Another question, and this might dovetail on Dr. Regor's question. This comes from Dr. Ram, who's a vascular surgeon. And he's asking about your thoughts on avocado and algae oil. Avocado in the diet, what do you think about that as a snack for someone that gets hungry between meals?
Again, I'm not recommending people snack because snacking is usually recreational eating. It means they're eating when they're not hungry, they're eating for recreation, and they're taking in more calories than they require. People don't need more than 3 meals a day unless they're a professional athlete or physical laborer. 3 meals a day is plenty of food for people. Or a child can eat more than 3 times a day, but an adult usually doesn't require more than 3 meals a day. I had a nice lunch today with beans and soup, and then I had some cherries and a piece of watermelon. I had beans, I had nuts, and it was no way, I wasn't even hungry by dinner time. There's no way you would need to eat in between that meal. But what I'm saying right now is that using a small amount of fat in the meal facilitates the absorption of the phytochemicals. So if you have that salad with a little bit of nut and seed dressing, you'll absorb 10 times the carotenoids and increase the anti-cancer effects. One of the reasons eating nuts and seeds are so protective against lifespan and prevent cancer, make you live longer, is you absorb probably 10 times the phytochemicals by including fat with the meal as opposed to not having any fat with the meal. Likewise, an avocado is a wholesome food, and I had some avocado with my dinner tonight, for example. I had a big cabbage, and I had a big raw, like coleslaw type salad with a guacamole dressing, and I had a corn tortilla with beans and onions and mushrooms mixed in. That was my dinner tonight. But in any case, what I'm saying is that as long as you're not taking in more calories than you need, and if people are overweight, they should be losing 1 kilogram a week. or 2 pounds a week. If they're not dropping half a kilogram every 3 days or a pound every 3 days, then they're chronically overeating. So people could modulate their use of nuts or avocado, too much or too little. If you're overweight and not losing weight, you might be overdoing it. So most of my overweight people here that are losing weight, and they're losing, usually 3 pounds a week at least, and most of them. I have a woman here who came in and she was 380 pounds 10 weeks ago, and now she weighs under 300 pounds. So she lost 80 pounds in the last 10 weeks. She lost 80 pounds in 10 weeks. It's huge, but of course she was very overweight. That's why she's losing weight so fast, because she was so overweight and unhealthy. But what I'm saying right now is that I eat avocado because I exercise a lot and I'm slim and I can eat a whole avocado a day. But a person that's overweight, I'm probably only giving them, I'm using an avocado for every splitting it up between 3 people, because I'm keeping their calories a little lower and I'm giving them some nuts and seeds. I'm usually keeping their nuts and seeds under 1.5 ounces a day. So that's about an ounce of nuts is about 175 calories. An 1.5 ounces is about 250 calories. I'm keeping their under 250 calories from nuts a day. And I'm not going to give them 2 ounces of nuts plus an avocado. If they're overweight, I'm going to give them a little less, maybe only 1 ounce of nuts and 1/2 an avocado. But if I'm treating a professional athlete, I'm giving them a whole avocado and 6 ounces of nuts. So the fat content is more modulated based on their caloric needs and how much exercise they're doing, if they're losing weight effectively.
Dr. Furman, we talked about G-bombs, and you're just throwing us G-bombs of knowledge. You're exploding like a volcano of information and wisdom here. And I know we're getting to the end of the hour, but is it okay with you if we go on a little bit longer, because the questions are just exploding?
Of course.
Thank you. So we'll go for a little bit longer. Again, appreciate that Dr. Furman has graciously agreed to allow us to go a little bit over time.
The person asked about algae oil, and that's what we do recommend, is that people take some extra EPA and DHA that usually is derived from algae, because you can get the EPA and DHA from fish oil, but now most people are taking the EPA and DHA from a vegan source, so they're not having to eat fish to get it. And you can get it made from algae. There's EPA and DHA made from algae that people can take.
Wonderful, thank you for that. So we have a question from one of our very well-respected integrative medicine physicians, who's actually part of our doctor expert group here, Dr. Naresh Bhatt. And he's asking about coconut oil. He's asking if coconut oil truly increases metabolic endotoxemia. And he's asking a question about MCTs, medium chain triglycerides, to balance out long chain lauric acid. And this might need a bit of explanation for the audience members that are not physicians.
Well, first of all, let's make something 100% clear that there's no controversy about, and that is all oil is 120 calories a tablespoon. And it goes from the lips to the hips in 5 minutes flat, because it's not bound to fiber. We're not talking about eating coconut, which is absorbed slowly. We're talking about coconut oil, which is absorbed almost instantaneously like other oils. When you eat the whole nut or seed, including avocado and coconuts, the fat goes into the bloodstream over a 2 to 4 hour period. When you eat the oil, it goes in over a 2 minute to 4 minute period, not a 2 to 4 hour period, but 2 to 4 minutes. And it's still, and when calories enter the bloodstream so rapidly, it stimulates dopamine centers in the brain to make you want to eat more food. So oil is an appetite stimulant. When you put oil on your food, you're not just taking the extra 120 calories. You're also desirous now of even more calories and want to eat more food with more oil in it. So, and coconut oil is highly saturated, and the MCT oil doesn't make up for the saturation of the saturated fat. So you still get effects to raise LDL cholesterol on coconut oil, especially, which is something that's not beneficial for people with heart disease trying to lower their cholesterol. So even though the saturated fats in coconut oil, because of the presence of MCT and the biological type of saturated fats that are there, are not as dangerous as the saturated fat from bacon and meat and from butter and ghee, even though it's not as dangerous, they still have negative or not positive effects. It's better not to have that oil and to eat the full nut or seed. There's no scientist in the world who will say that sesame oil is better than sesame seeds, or walnut oil is better than a walnut. Every nutritional scientist the world over recognizes the science to show that the whole food, that eating a little whole coconut is better than eating the oil from that food. And it's mostly because of the appetite stimulating effect and the effect on halting lipolysis. Let me say that one more time. The word lipolysis means the breakdown of fat. And you're either burning fat or you're putting fat on the body. So when you take an oil, because the fat calories are absorbed so rapidly, it's revving up fat storage hormones and stopping fat breakdown. And the only way you can keep fat breakdown going in between meals and at night is if you didn't have oil that day. If you start to add oil into your diet, you're going to make it very difficult to drop weight if you're overweight, even coconut oil.
Wonderful. Wonderful. So there's questions, a lot of questions coming in about arsenic. You mentioned brown rice having arsenic, and there's questions about the brown rice that's from California versus southern states of the U.S. And also brown rice is coming from India. A lot of people in the audience actually purchase their rice that's imported from other parts of the world. So is there a difference where the source of the food is?
There certainly is a difference, but keep in mind that the brown rice, hull of the brown rice, absorbs arsenic like a sponge much more readily than other foods do. You're still better off with other grains. So we know that the Consumer Reports magazine did a testing of the arsenic in various rices, and they found that the rices grown in various parts of the United States, even the organic ones, had comparable arsenic levels to the ones that were grown in China and India. So I don't have that data, but I think you can look it up in Consumer Reports and see because they analyze the various rices. I know that there's when you eat wild rice that grows wild on marshes in various parts of the country that are harvested by people in canoes with bamboo hits, and they've analyzed some of those rices that are not high in arsenic because they're growing in native marshes and they're not being commercially fertilized. So the answer to the question is, I don't know. I don't know. There might be some sources of rice, and I'm sure there are sources of rice around the world that are much better than others, but I don't have that expertise to tell you which is the good rice and which is the bad rice. You're going to have to try to search that out yourself. And I don't know if anybody has those answers, because I don't think that all these rices have been analyzed. So I think we got to be careful with our use of too much brown rice in the diet.
Excellent, excellent. Several questions on intermittent fasting. I know you mentioned that lunch should be the main meal of the day. You should only eat when you're hungry. If you're not hungry, don't eat. Don't be snacking between meals. So to me, that sounds like you are a proponent of fasting in between meals and maybe eating just 2 main meals of the day. Was that right?
Yes.
Excellent.
That's right. Some people need 3 meals a day, though, especially people doing a lot of exercise, because if they're eating 2 meals a day, they wind up stuffing themselves and stretching their stomach out and getting too full. You don't digest food well if you put too much food in at one time. So it's better to have the 3 meals and maybe do an 8 o'clock breakfast, a 12 o'clock lunch, and a 5 o'clock dinner, so you don't eat after 6 o'clock at night. But if you're a woman, or some women don't need 3 meals a day, they just need 2 meals a day, and some people are not as physically active, do okay on 2 meals a day. So I would say 2 meals a day or 3 meals a day. But you do want to narrow the feeding window, so you have at least 14 hours of no eating between the end of dinner and the start of breakfast. And you don't want to do it by making breakfast later. You want to do it by making dinner earlier, because it's not eating before bedtime that gives you maximum benefits for lifespan enhancement. So yes, I want people to do that, but I don't want them to think like eating 1 meal a day where you stuff yourself till you're really full and uncomfortable is the answer either, because you're not going to have good digestion and good health if you stretch out your stomach when you eat. So we should try to chew our food very well. When we're eating our salads and our vegetables, liquefy the foods, which also gives signals to the brain that you ate enough food. Eat a moderate amount of food. Don't get up from the table so you're uncomfortable or stuffed. But if you get really hungry again, then eat again. But don't eat when you're not hungry. There's no need for biological need for calories, and food tastes better when you're really hungry for the food too.
Excellent, thank you. Some practical questions. Several people in the audience are professionals that were traveling, of course, prior to COVID, maybe traveling out of the state, out of the country, 2 weeks a month. How does one manage that? It's easy when you're staying at Dr. Furman's retreat, but when you're out in the real world, traveling through airports, different time zones, restaurants, meetings, work lunches, how does one manage that in practice?
I travel a lot. I mean, I used to travel a lot before COVID, and I never found it too difficult because here in the United States, I could usually go to a store like a Whole Foods Market or in some store with a salad bar, and I could get a big salad with some beans on top. But I would eat a lot of frozen food too. I love like frozen artichoke hearts and frozen broccoli florets and frozen edamame. And I would just, I'd wrap the bag in a towel and I put it in, put it in I'd take some food with me, or I'd make a wrap. I would take like an Ezekiel wrap and I'd put in, roasted portobello mushrooms or roasted peppers with a sauce made out of like a garlic nutter made with roasted garlic and hemp seeds and cashews with some basil in there, and make a little pesto flavor, a little mustard or in there, and make a sauce with sprouts and avocado and red onion and tomatoes and mushrooms, and make a wrap. I would take these vegetable wraps with me, and I would always make a big salad and have salad. Like chop up the salad very small with a big chef's knife and make a delicious dressing for it, and put in the beans and the croutons and make it really heavy, and push it down into a container, and I have that container when I'm traveling. So I would travel with the food. I would also travel sometimes travel. I used to in the past travel with a can opener, but now I didn't even bother with that because you can get these foods in boxes when I get beans and stuff. But so you can use beans in boxes, beans in cans. You can eat, and you can just make do with food that you can get. I didn't want to eat much in restaurants. I want to eat because I don't have the time usually being so busy, and also it's you have to be in a bigger city, or a lot of the people places you travel don't necessarily have healthy restaurants, except those that have salad bars. You can pretty much make a healthy meal.
Excellent. Another one more about the practice of all this is that, yes, we hear you, you have a powerful message. It sounds like it really works, but it takes so much discipline, so much willpower. How does one actually put this into practice in real life?
It's funny because it doesn't take any willpower or discipline once you've done it long enough. It just becomes the way you prefer to eat. It's like me saying that your diet, where you go and get burgers and French fries and soda, I could never eat that way. It takes so much willpower and discipline to eat those foods because I don't like those foods and they're disgusting to me. And you couldn't get 10 men to hold me down to make me eat them because I would feel so bad. But so my taste buds adapted to what I eat. We love the recipes. I love that I can eat an ice cream made with frozen banana that's whipped with real vanilla bean powder and some walnuts. And I can eat a nice portion of it because it tastes so delicious. I can even put a little cocoa nibs in there or make a chocolate version. But I can make a delicious Thai curry sauce. I can make it with lemongrass, a little peanut, and a little bit of hemp seeds in there. I can make it all kinds of delicious. Tonight we had a little bit of a Mexican sauce, or I can make what I'm saying right now is we make such incredibly delicious recipes. We laugh when people say you need discipline, or some people will say, I'd rather die young than eat that way. Kill me right now if I have to live on carrot sticks and celery because I won't have any enjoyment in my life. And they just don't know. They're ignorant of the fact that eating this way with the recipes we've developed over the last decades, we have world-class chefs from around the world contributing recipes into this cooking style. And it tastes incredibly delicious, and people love eating this way. And I did a study on it with 760 people, and we asked them that question, do you like this diet as much as your old diet? And of course, the vast majority did like it better, but that was after 6 months. After 3 months, the vast majority liked the old diet better. But after 6 months, the vast majority liked the new diet better. And then you not only enjoy your taste buds acclimate, you not only enjoy eating this way, but then intellectually and emotionally, you feel good about eating things that are good for you, and you don't have to eat thimble-sized portions of food going hungry. You can eat more robustly and knowing you're eating something good for you and feel good after you ate.
Wonderful, thank you. So there's a lot of people that are vegetarians in their diet, and there's several questions coming from them. So I'm going to see if I can lump them together, and this is 4 or 5 questions in one. So a lot of people in the audience are actually lacto-vegetarians, which means they're having some milk. And in the traditional Indian diet, yogurt has been encouraged and spoken of as a source of probiotics. A lot of people make their own yogurt at home. The second question along that was vegetarian sources of omega-3. I think we talked about that a little bit, the algae oil, but are there others? And three would be beans and the issue with gas coming from eating beans. And you talked about soaking and pressure cooking a little bit. So if we can elaborate on those three things a little bit more, the yogurt, omega-3, and beans.
Right. Well, the bean issue again is that when people aren't used to eating much beans, they could have more gas. But so they might have to start with smaller amounts. But your body adapts to it with time. But the trick is you have to chew it to a liquid in your mouth before you swallow it. Beans and greens particularly should be chewed very well. And people wind up, they get used to eating conventional foods like potatoes and burgers and pizza, which you don't have to chew because it's already no fiber in it. You can swallow dairy products whole practically without chewing. But then people go to eat beans the same way and they get indigestion because they're used to eating things like they ate the pizza and the cottage cheese. When you're eating a bean, you've got to liquefy it in your mouth and chew it till it's just smooth and there's no particles there. So of course we're talking about starting with smaller amounts and chewing very well. And you see the resistant starch and the fiber in beans becomes a fuel for the best type of gram-positive bacteria that actually adhere to the villi, the lining of the walls that line the wall of your small intestines, and create this biofilm that coats the villi, protecting you from antigenic stimulation and also lowering the glycemic effect of everything you eat. Scientists call that the second meal effect. The benefit you eat from eating beans and mushrooms and onions and greens. In other words, 2 raw foods and 2 cooked foods give you this thick and protective biofilm. And the 2 raw foods are raw green vegetables and raw onion or scallion. And the 2 cooked foods are cooked beans and cooked mushrooms. When you combine those 4 foods in your diet, then you have the most protective microbiome and the most favorable balance of bacteria in your gut. And dairy products give you lactobacilli, but you produce all the best bacteria and a much more beneficial effect on keeping gram negatives down when you actually actually eat real food, real produce with all the high fiber, because the healthiest bacteria, particularly the bifidobacteria, live off the fiber, produce butyrate, which is a short-chain fatty acid. And butyrate has anti-diabetic effects and has negative feedback effects on your appetite and the hypothalamus to tell you to eat less food. Enough fiber turns your appetite down via these bacteria producing butyrate. And the gram-positives and the bifidobacteria from the beans and the greens and the mushrooms and the onions are the most favorable bacteria for this. So generally speaking, just like we said earlier, that dairy products drive IGF-1 too high if you eat them too much in your diet. And dairy products, the people that have higher consumption of dairy have higher risk of breast and prostate cancer because the high IGF-1 does 2 things, of course. It permissively allows estrogen and it also drives growth hormone and cellular replication and angiogenesis. What I'm saying right now is that dairy products become more dangerous when a person is overweight. Because when you're overweight, you have more angiogenesis promotion and more insulin resistance and more estrogen production. And when you have these negative hormones raising up from being overweight and then you eat dairy in your body, you're gonna push up IGF-1. And it's that sandwich of high insulin from being overweight and high IGF-1 that's the major factor driving breast and prostate cancer. So we have to be very careful with dairy because if you're going to consume dairy products, then draw your IGF-1 level because your IGF-1 should be below 120, I would think, if you want to have good health. So we're saying here that the more dairy you eat, it dials up an unfavorable hormone that can shorten your lifespan. And there's probably some level that's kept low enough it's not going to have a negative effect. But I don't know exactly what that level is. It's probably just, some small amount of ounces a week, let's say 6 ounces a week or something, or under 10 ounces a week. But for each person, that may be different. So if you're insisting on using dairy, use it sparingly, and perhaps even consider checking a blood test for IGF-1 that doesn't get too high. And if you're overweight or you have serious disease process, you'll get much better reversal of disease and protection by getting the oil, the ghee out and getting the yogurt out and getting the dairy out to keep IGF-1 low.
Wonderful. Thank you. We'll do a couple more questions. I know we're running way over time and we want to be respectful of your time, Dr. Furman. We might need to have another session with you, but I'm going to try to lump together several questions into one, and it relates to substitution. So a lot of people are asking if they're allergic to soy protein, they have can't eat avocados, can't eat mushrooms. We talked about the gas in beans. What can they eat if they have intolerance to a lot of the things that you're mentioning as superfoods in your GBOMs?
Well, I do advocate people eat beans. If they can't eat one bean, they can usually eat another bean. It's very rare that a person's allergic to all beans, soy and lentils and chickpeas and red beans and azuki beans and mung beans. So there's usually and even some people can use some sprouted beans, like sprouted mung beans and things like that if they can't tolerate beans. And the people who can't do nuts, usually they can do some seeds like hemp seeds or chia seeds. So there's usually a workaround. It's very unusual a person's allergic to everything that's in their family of food. You know what I mean? So they don't want them to just willy-nilly not eat foods because they think they're allergic unless they definitely have a reaction, because many people can have a digestive intolerance and can eat small amounts and get used to digesting these foods well, especially if they chew them better and start with a smaller amount. So, I've been doing this for more than 30 years, and I've seen thousands and thousands of people, 10,000, patient charts. And I rarely see people that are allergic to all nuts and seeds and all beans. It's usually, so there's usually certainly some things people can eat.
Excellent. And mushrooms, if they can't eat mushrooms, then don't eat mushrooms, right?
If you're allergic, don't eat mushrooms unless it's a certain type of mushroom. But even mushroom allergy is particularly rare,
Great. There's a really good clarifying question on multivitamins. You said don't have folic acid. You can have folate in food. Does that mean we shouldn't be taking multivitamins?
That's correct. I mean, in full fair disclosure, I make a multivitamin without folic acid in it, but of course, I'm recommending, that's why I had to design my own, because there aren't a lot of brands out there that don't have folic acid added. I don't even recommend people take nutritional yeast that's fortified with folic acid. I don't want people to take a lot of folic acid. So they're better off taking the individual nutrients than taking a multivitamin that contains vitamin A, acetyl or retinol palmitate, and folic acid, and even isolated vitamin E fragments are not beneficial. There are some supplemental ingredients that are potentially harmful, and conventional multivitamins that have the B12 and the D and the zinc may have other things that aren't very good for them. So they're better off just taking a little extra zinc and B12 and iodine or a little bit of kelp and taking the DHA. And we want people to take the short chain omega-3 by taking a little bit of flaxseed or chia seed or hemp seeds. And green vegetables have ALA too. And also take the DHA from algae oil as well. There may be some people, but that's a minority of people, who don't need to take the algae oil. And if they don't want to take that, they can see if they're that minority that has an omega-3 index in the blood test that's above 5. But most of us have an omega-3 index that's below 5 and still need to take that algae oil. If we're not eating any seafood, if we're totally, or salamanders or snakes or worms, or we're not eating frogs, we eat no animal products, then we want to get, and dairy is not a good source of omega-3, by the way. So cow's milk is not a great source of omega-3. So a person who's a vegetarian, dairy is still going to have a poor omega-6, omega-3 ratio, which can then increase their risk of Parkinson's or neurological disorders like cognitive impairment later on in life. And some of the people I admire most who are eating super healthy, they lived a long time, but they eventually succumbed to some neurologic problem from omega-3 deficiencies. And I've seen too many issues over my career now about this problem.
But here's one from one of our teammates, which is, does nutrition address chronic conditions and tendencies like constipation, skin ailments, we talked about autoimmune, flatulence, and other things besides cancer and heart disease?
Well, sometimes.
Yes.
Yeah, the answer is yes. You're going to feel better, you're going to sleep better, you're going to have more energy, you're going to think more clearly, and you're going to digest food better if you eat right. But of course, as people are recognizing, sometimes there's some dietary modifications or adjustments that have to be made for individual differences. We're all not perfect clones of each other. And sometimes there's where a doctor or some person with some experience could advise a person appropriately if they're not thriving by utilizing the general recommendations. but that's relatively rare. 98% of people don't need modification or don't need, they shouldn't be problematic eating a diet like we're describing. So you're listening, and so move your diet more in this direction, removing some of those foods as much as you can that don't have these extra beneficial factors in them, and certainly try to eat bigger salads which you chew well. Start to eat less processed foods and oil and less dairy products, and more beans and greens and onions and mushrooms and fresh fruit like berries and kumquats and loquats and pomegranates and low sugar fruits. And there's nothing wrong with frozen food. You could always eat some frozen fruit and get grab something from the frozen section if you don't have time to cook and throw a sauce on it. It takes 5 minutes to make a sauce in the blender, to put it over your food, and to take some frozen fruit and defrost it. It's very easy to make a big pot of soup on the weekend and have that same big pot of soup for the next 5 days. You don't have to be cooking and slaving in the kitchen every night. You have salad with a dressing that you made 3 days ago, and the soup that you made 4 days ago, and some fruit or frozen fruit for dessert. It's not that hard to do this.
Wonderful. Once again, folks, we have had this privilege to spend some time with best-selling author and transformative celebrity physician, Dr. Joel Fuhrman. He's written, 8 bestsellers, Joel?
I've written 12 books, but 7 of them have been New York Times bestsellers.
7 bestsellers. My favorite is this one. People are asking about cookbooks, and the Eat to Live cookbook by Dr. Joel Fuhrman is something that I recommend to all my patients.
That book is that's like one of my best-selling books, the Eat to Live cookbook. Probably the best-selling book is the Eat to Live cookbook. But my most recent book is Eat for Life. That's my newest book.
Excellent. And like I said, thanks for writing the foreword to my book, Turbo Metabolism, Joel. I want to do a shout out to you for doing that. What are your closing comments for us, and where can people find you?
My closing comments are: don't be satisfied with being sick and taking drugs. If you're on medications and you have some problem, let's figure out how you can get off them and get you well. Don't just accept the fact you're going to be sick the rest of your life. Be totally well and live life with your full degree of freedom and your full amount of confidence and no fear of COVID or any other disease, because you can do it. It's not that hard. It's fun doing this. This is a lot of fun. Looking forward to coming back. And people can always find me at drfuhrman.com, get more information and see all my things I write, and get more of my books and booklets, videos. And of course, if people want to come and see me and stay with me, I'm here in San Diego. They can come and visit me and stay in my retreat and have a great time and lose weight.
And all that information, folks, again, is at drfuhrman.com. You can find out about all his books, all his works, a lot of material, free materials on the website, and you can find out how you can spend some time at the retreat if you're really serious about reversing chronic disease. Once again, Dr. Joel Fuhrman, thank you so much from the bottom of my heart. Really appreciate the opportunity to spend some time with you this evening.